Computer viruses. Computer viruses are something that's synonymous with being on the internet. They're practically everywhere you go, and I think everyone's gotten a virus before. Whether it was from opening an email attachment or downloading something off the internet when we were kids, whether you're old enough to remember LimeWire, try to get Minecraft for free, or use those god-awful Club Penguin coin generators.
Type in some information. So it is, let's see, I think that's, yeah, and that's it there. And then the password with it. And let's do 50.
Everyone's gotten a virus before. If you had a family computer, you know how bad viruses can get. We used to have one, but our solution, instead of using an antivirus program, was to throw the entire thing away, as we'd rather lose years worth of data than deal with those constant pop-ups slowing down the computer. As malicious as they might be, computer viruses are pretty easy to prevent. Well, for one, you don't open random email attachments, don't download weird stuff off the internet, and use an antivirus. In the early days of the internet, there existed chain emails. It was the primary method of spreading viruses. A friend or someone on your mailing list would send you and others an email, and you would download the email attachment, which would infect your computer. Viruses, however, have existed long before this and have a storied history. The first confirmed computer virus was the Creeper System virus in 1971. It was created by Bob Thomas, a computer engineer working at B&N Systems, a company that helped develop ARPANET. ARPANET is the precursor to the internet. It was developed by DARPA, a wing of the US Department of Defense. Contrary to how many viruses behave nowadays, Bob didn't have any malicious intent when he was creating the Creeper virus. In fact, all he was trying to do was demonstrate self-replicating programs for research purposes. Creeper was a primitive virus by today's standards, and it functioned very simply. It would scan a network looking for vulnerable targets. Specifically, it would scan the IP addresses to find systems with unprotected FTP access. Using this insecure connection, it would send a copy of itself to the target. And after transmission, the virus would function as a program which was then executed. All the virus would really do was display a message on the screen of the computer saying, quote, "I'm a creeper, catch me if you can." In the end, however, the Creeper virus didn't infect more than 28 machines, according to Ray Tomlin, a computer programmer who also worked on ARPANET. But he's best known for being the inventor of email. The virus didn't have any malicious intent, nor did it cause any unintended problem in infected systems, but it did help create the first antivirus program, which was also created by Ray Tomlin, called Reaper. He did it, in his own words, purely to get the satisfaction of having it done. The way Reaper worked was it would package itself and ship itself to a resource sharing program on another computer, which would then run the program. Reaper would then hunt down and delete the virus. The Creeper virus, while being primitive and harmless, was an essential building block for the future of viruses. It helped set in motion everything that was to come. Before we get into that, though, we have to go over some terminology. Computer virus is an umbrella term to describe malware. Malware would be the correct terminology to use for everything like Trojan horses, spyware, worms, but for the sake of simplicity, we'll just refer to them as viruses because that's what most people know them as. The first malicious virus came in 1974. It would infect a computer and run multiple copies of itself, hindering the performance of the machine and eventually causing it to crash. This was known as the rabbit virus, named so due to the speed of its replication. Today, this would be referred to as a fork bomb. It's most effective on Linux and Unix-like systems while being completely ineffective on Windows systems due to built-in precautions. Since the days of the Creeper and the rabbit virus, however, viruses have become much more plentiful, and they've evolved to become more dangerous and difficult to detect. There are several kinds of viruses. A virus, as we mentioned before, is an umbrella term for any sort of malicious computer software, but the correct term would be malware. The first type of computer virus is a Trojan horse. This is quite self-explanatory. Everybody knows the story of the Trojan horse. Greek soldiers hid themselves inside a wooden horse and offered the horse to the city they were besieging. And then at night they came out and took the city. This is basically how Trojan horse viruses work, hence the name. They pretend to be a legitimate program and then once downloaded execute malicious files. A well-known example of this would be the WannaCry virus. Spyware is, as the name says, designed to spy on users and save information like passwords, usernames, etc. Worms are a different type of virus altogether. They're self-replicating and target multiple systems, hopping from system to system, and worst of all, they don't need human interference to spread. Instead, they can spread on their own. Ransomware is probably something you're familiar with. It hijacks files or entire drives in some cases and encrypts them. These files or drives can only be unlocked if a ransom is paid to the virus author, usually in the form of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. But paying the ransom is not guaranteed to work. Ransomware attacks have become increasingly common in recent years, especially against large institutions like companies or hospitals that have deep bank accounts to pay the virus authors. Adware also, as the name suggests, floods the system with ads. This, in a lot of cases, is used to make the adware authors money, but it can also open vulnerabilities for other viruses to enter. More than anything, though, adware is incredibly annoying. With that out of the way, let's talk about how they spread. There's several ways for computer viruses to spread. As we mentioned before, the most common way in the early days was email viruses, which would be spread through email attachments. Nowadays, instant messaging, for example, Facebook or Discord, is one of the go-to methods, as it's easier to get users to click a link if they think it's coming from someone they trust, like a friend or family. File sharing platforms like Mega, Dropbox, ShareDrive, or Google Drive are also a hotbed for this kind of activity. Likely the most common form, however, is through software download, specifically pirating stuff. The final way is through an unpatched software vulnerability. As the name suggests, this is just what happens when you don't update your system frequently. It leaves room for viruses to slip through the cracks. Now to the title of the video, virus hoaxes. Virus hoaxes are a lot more difficult to prevent, as they don't leverage any sort of hardware or software exploits, but to gain access, they spread using a more effective means, and that being hysteria. And this, unfortunately, makes everybody susceptible to them. The first virus hoax on record came from 1988. It was called the 2400 baud modem virus. Initial warning came as a message from the user Mike Rochanel. The message read as follows: subject line, really nasty virus. I've discovered probably the world's worst computer virus yet. I had just finished a late night session of BBSing and file treading when I exited Telex 3 and attempted to run Parlac to unarc the software I had downloaded. Next thing I knew, my hard drive was seeking all over and it was apparently writing random sectors. Thank God for strong coffee and a recent backup. The message goes on in arduous technical detail to describe what the virus would do to your system. It could allegedly delete and corrupt all hard drive data. The user then recommends that everyone sticks to 1200 baud modems to prevent infection. At the time, nothing like this had really happened before, so it caused widespread panic and confusion. A lot of users did in fact follow the advice, and it went on to become one of the most successful hoaxes in history. Later, a user, Robert Morris, began spreading another parody of the virus. The message read as, "Warning, there's a new virus on the loose that's worse than anything I've ever seen before. It gets in through the power line, riding on the power line's 60 Hz subcarrier." The message goes on to tell people not to use power lines or batteries or storing files on floppy disks or reading messages. This response would have been funny, except that 19 days earlier, Morris developed the Morris worm and began spreading it while the modem virus panic discourse was still going on. The Morris worm was essentially a rabbit virus that would send multiple copies of itself to a target network until it overloaded the system. Ironically enough, Morris's father worked for the NSA. A friend of Morris said that he only created it to see if it could be done. The Morris worm ended up infecting computers in the low thousands and cost anywhere from $100,000 to $10 million in damage. Morris ended up being the first person charged under the new Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. As to the pod modem virus, there were some pretty good giveaways as to it being a hoax. First of all, it's probably not a good idea to trust any message on a bulletin board system, as it could be sent by anyone. Imagine trusting a random email today saying that you had a virus. Also, microchannel, microchannel. The name's just a play on microchannel. But to be completely fair to the users, they didn't have any previous experience with hoaxes. The online population was pretty low, so there was less of a reason to distrust others online, and the widespreadness was a result of being the unlucky first to experience a hoax of this nature. The next significant hoax came in 1991, a little after the Gulf War. That'll be important for later, but it came from a column in the InfoWorld magazine. It described a weapon developed by, quote, the NSA's best, which targeted real-time computer systems. Called the AF91 virus, it was designed to exploit highly protected command and control systems through their peripherals, that in this case being printer. Once inside, the virus adapts to work in any architecture, somehow, and can disable entire systems. It was reportedly installed by the CIA onto a printer that was smuggled into Iraq via Jordan. That printer would then be plugged into Iraq's air defense network by unknowing employees, which would then disable the networks. Other versions of the story say that a fiber optic connection was dug up by US Special Forces where a virus was jammed into it and then remained dormant until the air war began. As you've probably guessed by now, this was a joke, a very, very obvious joke at that. It was published on InfoWorld magazine on April 1st, but that didn't stop it from spreading. Notably, this time, regular netizens weren't the only ones to fall victim to the joke. Major publications like the Associated Press, CNN, US News, Nightline, Popular Mechanics, and the Hudson Institute all fell victim to this joke as well. However, none fell quite as hard as Brian Duffy did. Brian Duffy, at the time, was a writer for US News. In an interview with the Associated Press, he backed up his sources, those being anonymous senior officials in the US government. In a later interview, Brian Duffy also said that he had, quote, no doubt that US intelligence agents carried out a virus attack. However, even he had to acknowledge that the similarities to the InfoWorld joke were, in his words, troubling. It's still unknown how such an obvious joke ended up fooling so many people and major publications as well, as if they read the entire article, at the end it says word for word, and now for the final secret, the meaning of the AF91 designation. 91 is the Julian date for April Fool's Day. This story would continue circulating for a couple years afterwards. Later editions would say that the virus was installed on a computer chip and that the targeted system was the Kari system that Iraqi air command and control systems were actually based off of, or that the printers used were French, or that the virus failed because it was bombed by the US Air Force before it could go into action. This hoax, as we'll come to know, is one of the few that actually didn't spread via chainmail. But again, like the last one, I wouldn't blame normal people for falling for it, as major news publications were publishing stories as if it were a real virus and not the most obvious joke ever. This next one is probably one of the most influential and widespread in history. The Good Times virus, well, at least the hoax, began spreading via email in late 1994. Like most other virus hoaxes, it spread via chainmail, with an email that read, "Here is some important information. Beware of a virus called Good Times. Happy Hanukkah, everyone, and be careful out there. There's a virus on America Online being sent via email. If you get anything called Good Times, don't read it or download it. It is a virus that will erase your hard drives. Forward this to all your friends. It may help them a lot." This uses the usual tactic of appearing friendly, although in 1994 it was not a widely recognized thing. The email claimed that the original warning was issued by the FCC. The email itself was also pretty technical in nature and seemed designed to look informative. The virus itself would allegedly destroy hard drives or place the processor in an infinite binary loop, severely damaging it. It could also infect your computer without any program being downloaded through existing email systems. Of course, like other hoaxes of this kind, there are some dead giveaways. First of all, the FCC doesn't handle virus warnings. The US Department of Energy does for some reason. Also, no official warning was attached with the email and no contact name for the FCC was given. Also, processor loops can't damage CPUs as computers are built quite specifically to do that kind of work. Also, you can't get viruses from just reading emails, or at least at the time you couldn't. On December 6th of the same year, the US Department of Energy Computer Incident Advisory Capability issued a bulletin declaring that the virus was a hoax. One of the keys in this hoax and other hoaxes like it spreading was that in the final line, it instructed the user to forward it to all your friends, which proved to be incredibly effective. One of the biggest repercussions from the Good Times virus is the sheer amount of copycats it spawned. AOL for free, Death69, Diana, Free Money, Arena, Join the Club, MMF, Moment of Silence, Pen Pal Greetings, and Valentine's Greetings, just to name a few. These would continue to wreak havoc for over a decade afterwards. Unlike practically every other virus hoax, we do know who the author of this one is. In 1997, the Cult of the Dead Cow hacking group took responsibility for the hoax. In their own words, the Good Times virus hoax was an exercise to prove the gullibility of self-proclaimed experts on the internet. They said that any chicken head would be able to see through the message, and also that they have far worse to release on us. Funnily enough, they're still active as of 2024 with a cool 90s ultra-low bandwidth website, which I do recommend checking out. The Budweiser Frogs hoax is one of the more lighthearted ones. In 1995, Budweiser began a weird advertising campaign including 3 frogs named Bud, Wise, and It first appeared during the Super Bowl. All the ad really does is have the 3 frogs say their name in order to say Budweiser.
Bud. Bud. Wise. Bud. Bud. Wise. Bud. Bud. Wise. Bud. Wise. Bud. Bud. Wise.
Later, in 1997, Budweiser began offering a screensaver of the frogs on their website. This screensaver is where the hoax comes from. The hoax, as with practically all of them, circulated via chain emails. There are a few variations of this hoax, but one that I could find read, quote, "Someone is sending out a very cute screensaver of the Budweiser frogs. If you download it, you will lose everything. Your hard drive will crash and someone from the internet will get your screen name and password. Do not download it under any circumstances. It just went into circulation yesterday. Please distribute this message. This is a new, very malicious virus, and not many people know about it. This information was announced yesterday morning by Microsoft. Please share it with everyone that might have access to the internet. Once again, pass this along to everyone in your address book so that this may be stopped. AOL has said this is a very dangerous virus and that there is no remedy for it at this time." That's just a version of the email that was sent around. I couldn't find the original email from 1997. The virus would allegedly destroy your computer by corrupting the hard drive. But unlike most virus hoaxes, there might have been a little bit of truth to this. If the screensaver was run at the same time the computer was defragmenting the hard drive, the screensaver would most of the time interfere with the writing or verification of this data. What this would lead to is data being overwritten or destroyed. The likely assumption of an untrained user was that it was a virus. This hoax, as ridiculous as it was, had quite a long shelf life. The last discussion that I could find was from a Microsoft forum with a panicked user from 2009. For background, AOL, or America Online, was a dial-up internet service provider, kind of like what your ISP does today. They would charge by the minute for online internet access, and it was the go-to way for getting online in the early 90s or early 2000s in North America. The email read as follows: "Anyone who receives this must send it to as many people as you can. It is essential that this problem be reconciled as soon as possible." A few hours ago, I opened an email that had the subject heading of AOLforfree.com. Within seconds of opening it, a window appeared and began to display my files that were being deleted. I immediately shut down my computer, but it was too late. This virus wiped me out. It ate the antivirus software that comes with Windows 95 program, along with FPROT antivirus software. Neither was able to detect it. Please be careful and send this to as many people as possible so maybe this new virus can be eliminated. Oftentimes the subject line would be "Congratulations, you are a winner," or "AOL for free, get AOL for free." And it was allegedly sent by a user named Matthew27 or VPVVPPVVP. This hoax was pretty annoying, of course, until it became an actual danger. On April 16th of 1997, the online security website securityhome.eu received a file named AOLforfree.com. This file contained a Trojan horse which would attempt to execute the commands on screen now. These commands, when executed on a Windows system, would delete all files on the C drive. The program, of course, needed to be downloaded or executed for it to work, and was undetectable to antivirus softwares of the time. Just to clutter up the internet even more, at the same time there was a third file floating around for Macs called AOL for free, but the difference here is that this actually worked and it gave users access to AOL services for free by bypassing the login screen. Of course, this was super illegal, and Nicholas Ryan, a student at Yale, eventually pleaded guilty to writing the program. He got off with 6 months of house arrest and a 2-year probation period. The email reads as follows: "I got this message about a computer virus that can produce a lot of damage to your computer. If you follow the instructions, which are very easy, you'll be able to clean your computer. Apparently, the virus spreads through address books. I got it, then maybe I passed it on to you too. Sorry." The name of the virus is transmitted automatically through Messenger and the address books of Outlook. The virus is neither detected by Norton nor McAfee, and it remains in lethargy for 14 days and even more before it destroys the whole system. It can be eliminated during this period. The email goes on and gives detailed instructions on how to remove the virus from your system. This was one of the first examples of a truly malicious hoax, as that file is just the Java debugger manager for Microsoft Runtime Engine. It comes pre-installed on all Windows systems. Deleting this file would cause some Java functions to break. The Semantic software company reported dealing with numerous calls regarding the virus and users that had already deleted the file. Made up nearly 14% of all hoaxes reported to the Sophos antivirus firm and was the top of their list for nearly 8 months. This hoax, like some of the others, might have had a hint of truth to it, however. The Magister A virus was capable of sending infected copies of the file to individual computers. Up-to-date antiviruses, however, would have been able to detect this virus. This was easily one of the most widespread virus hoaxes of the early 2000s. This hoax was based off the earlier setup utility for long file name backup.exe, which was the earlier, less widespread predecessor of this hoax. This was one of the last truly widespread virus hoaxes that spread via chainmail, as they became significantly less prevalent after this point. These days, virus hoaxes are not as widespread as they once were. Chainmail has fell out of fashion, but hoaxes like this can still be found on sites like Facebook. They mainly target older demographics, as they're much more susceptible to falling for these kinds of hoaxes. Many of the pages that I researched through when making this were older than even I was, but I'm glad that this part of the old internet didn't stick around, as this would probably be really annoying these days. These hoaxes, however, did make the average internet user more attuned to viruses and preventing them, but judging by the average internet user, that's not exactly saying much. Nowadays, virus authors have to be much more creative to beat both antivirus programs and users. Or, like a lot of viruses, they could just target old people and find quite a bit of success with that demographic. Overall, I am not a big fan of viruses or virus hoax, but I'll be the first to admit it would be pretty funny to see these make a comeback in the modern internet.